Funky Fresh.
Hello and good morning, you two.
Question for you. When's playback on this bad boy?
I'll turn it around today if you want it today. The sooner the better, man. This is my kind of stuff.
Captain Jim, there you go. All yours, hard out at 40.
Jim, it's such a blessing to share a conversation with you because it's not every day that we get to talk with those who have stepped through those walls of protectiveness that a creative person has, and you get the story. It's such a pleasure to talk with you today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's a nice intro.
Well, the thing is, Jim, is that you realize that it's not just about what we want as interviewers. You're going in there to help serve the fan as well as sell the product the artist is putting out there.
Yeah, I mean, you never mistake the fact that these interviews are transactional. The artist is getting something out of them. They're getting coverage, print, which ostensibly may lead to record sales or concert ticket sales. But I think the concept of Backstage and Beyond has to do with not just selling the record, selling the artist, and talking about things that, you know, yes, some are musical, some are not musical, some are life choices that are made, and some are about songwriting, some are about other influences. And, you know, it happened in an era where the doors were more open to those kind of things, a lot of these. And artists were less guarded than they are now, and there weren't cell phones and cameras. And, you know, people could be a little more, shall we say, free and loose with what they said and what they did. And I was fortunate to be privy to that and I guess be able to hold up a conversation well enough to get them talking. And a lot of that's there in the book.
What was it like to go back and revisit this? Because, I mean, I'm at that point in my career where it's like, okay, who's going to get all these interviews when I'm gone? I mean, and you know, I would love to just donate them to a school of broadcasting of some sort, but would they respect them like you and I do? Because we were in that moment to get them.
Yeah, well, that was really one of the impetuses to write the book. I mean, Ira Robbins, my publisher at Trouser Press, when we were talking about doing it, you know, that was one of the things he said. He said, look, it's kind of a legacy thing. You've got good stories here. And there's some of them are scattered in different forms, you know, on different websites. Rock's Back Pages in England has a lot of these things, not these stories particularly, but a lot of the things I've done. But, you know, this is the opportunity to collect and refashion, reshape what I've done over the years and, you know, put it out there. And I mean, yeah, the books will survive me. And I guess there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that I did what I did. And at some point along the line in whatever year, people will still pick it up and go, oh my God, you know, I heard about this artist. I don't know that much. And here's a window into who they were.
Yeah, the book we're talking about is Backstage and Beyond. Here's why this book is so important. Just yesterday, I was reading an article about who is the listener of classic rock radio stations today. Believe it or not, Generation Z. Those young little monkeys are out there listening to our classic rock. And the thing about it is they don't know the artist, and your book is fitting right in there for them to have that lift.
Yes, exactly. I was talking to my cousin who's in that generation about doing this, and he was kind of encouraging me and saying, yeah, people like me, really, we don't know that much. We know the names, but we don't know that much about them, and we're really curious. We're music fans. And, you know, that to me was also sort of like, okay, well, you know, I've got some insights, I've got some stories, and these people have some stories to tell. And there's a wide range in the book from, you know, folkies like Joan Baez and Judy Collins, Katie Lang, you know, to Roy Orbison, to Darlene Love, Richard Thompson, into the punk world, the B-52s, the Gang of Four, you know, some great times with the Pogues, for instance, and the classic rock guys. I mean, John Fogerty, Tina Turner, Neil Young, you know, and these, you know, they're not complete stories in the sense that a lot of these artists have biographies or autobiographies. This is a slice of time that I spent with them, not representative necessarily of their whole life, but of the time that I spent. And it's kind of fascinating to hear, say, Neil Young talk about his immersion at the time into country music and saying, you know, how many more loud guitar solos can you hear? I'm done with it. And then, of course, 2 years later, right? Ragged Glory. So, there's a lot of fun, I think, in that. And artists can be very adamant and very serious about what they're doing. And then, you look ahead and go, well, that didn't really hold, did it?
Have you ever crossed the line with an artist? And I'll give you a good example. When I was with Ian Anderson, I called him a songwriter. He was like, I am not a songwriter. I am a wordsmith. Get it right.
Oh, that's interesting. I've got a really great Ian Anderson. He was Anderson and Tull were one of the new chapters that were added, and I've got this little bit. If you don't mind, it's really funny. He was talking about how Frank Zappa spoke rather badly of Jethro Tull, didn't like him at all.
Oh no!
And this is what a quote from Ian when I asked him about that. He said, strangely, before he died, he started reaching out to people. I got a message passed to me that Frank wanted to call me, giving me his home phone number. I deeply regret I didn't have the nerve to let the phone ring and have someone pick it up. I called him 3 times, hung up being terrified because I didn't know what to say. I didn't let the phone ring and speak to Frank. How do you deal with a guy that you've carried with you for a couple of decades, the belief that he really didn't like you, and suddenly he wants to call you when he's on his deathbed? Whatever it was he wanted to talk about, I have no idea and will never know now. And, I said, you might think he wants to make amends, but and this I told Ian, I said, but what if he just wanted to say, hey, Ian, you still suck? and Ian laughs and he said, yeah, that's it. That might have been the outcome. I just wanted to call you and tell you before I die. I'm paraphrasing.
So why is Peter Gabriel still one of music's most unspoken stories? I mean, I'm so proud of you for putting him in there because he's still that one artist that I wish that we knew more about.
Don't know. I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, he's certainly done press. I got him at a great time, the first time, which was when he was releasing his first couple of solo records and shedding the genesis, the ornate art rock of the early 70s. And he had kind of picked up on the new wave idea of shorter songs, more compact songs, still progressive rock, but just in a different context. And he was just terrific talking about character songs, writing from different points of view, like The Intruder being one of them, about somebody breaking into your home. The one, Family Snapshot, which was taking the point of view of Arthur Bremer, the guy who shot George Wallace, because he wanted the fame that came with being an assassin. And I mean, Gabriel's mind is just, he works that way. And I think brilliant songwriter. And those, early, this was sort of before the big fame that he had after, the Sledgehammer and all those things. Yeah. This was when he was sort of reestablishing himself. And it was a great period. It was almost like a new artist in a way, just so enthusiastic about what they were doing and doing such great stuff.
Wow. Where can people go to find out more about everything that you're doing? Because I really want them to tap into your experience and your personal legacy.
Well, actually, I do have a public Facebook page. It's Jim Sullivan INK, and I post there a lot of sort of outtake type things and things that are happening right now, obviously. So that's is pretty revelatory. The books are basically the best of what I've got, of what I've done, and reshaped and reconfigured. The ebook is the big one. It has 11 bonus chapters in it, and 72 total, I believe. So there's a lot of reading, and it's the kind of thing you can read sequentially if you want to. I find most people find an artist they like, they'll start there.
That's it.
And then if they like what they read, they'll keep on going, and they'll go, I've not really heard of this guy or this band, but I like the way Jim put words together, and maybe they'll keep going on. And that's kind of my ideal. And I think that does happen to a degree.
Wow. 10 minutes with you is not enough, Jim. You got to come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open.
I'm happy to do it. Love it. I love talking to you, man.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Hey, we'll do it. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Hello and good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Arrow. It's Peter calling with Anne Jacobsen. How are you?
Doing very well, Peter. I hope you're having a great day.
All right. Great. You sound a little bit distant, but I think that's once I put her in, she might be able to hear you a little better.
How about that? That sounds a lot better?
A little bit, yeah. Let me push her. Maybe that'll do it. All right, hold on. Let me push her. All right, Ann, you're joined by Arrow.
Hello and good morning, Anne Jacobsen. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm great today. How are you doing?
Absolutely fantastic. So mellow, and yet your book is so explosive. I mean, wow. Where did you pull that energy from?
You know, I'm an investigative journalist. I've written, before nuclear war, a scenario, I wrote 6 previous books about the CIA and the Pentagon. Very little surprises me. But I must say, this book was shocking.
I bet.
To report.
I was shocked when I read about it, and I was even more shocked when I stepped inside of it, because we are at a breaking point right now. We're at that one breaking point where something could really go wrong, and we need to be educated as to how serious this really is.
It's precisely why I wrote the book. I wanted to show readers in appalling detail just how horrific a nuclear war would be. The idea that we are at the brink is absolutely correct. The UN Secretary General recently said we're one miscalculation, one misunderstanding away from nuclear annihilation. That's a direct quote.
You know, one of the things that you scared me with right away inside this book was the fact that you were very transparent when you said that it doesn't matter where you are in this country, there's a bomb pointed directly at you. And that woke me up in a way that it gave me those childhood fears that I had up in Montana with those Minuteman missiles.
Well, it should frighten you. I mean, the whole idea of nuclear war, that nuclear war will not happen, rather, is predicated on this psychological phenomena called deterrence. And this is what the Defense Department lives by. Deterrence is just another word for prevention. So we all live under the threat that nuclear war will never happen because we have all these nuclear weapons pointed at our adversaries with nuclear weapons, and they have them pointed at us, and therefore this is just going to hold. But to my eye, the real question is, what if it doesn't hold? And that's the question I took to my sources, former secretaries of defense, former nuclear subforce commander. I mean, you saw the list of interviews I did. And I asked them, and I discussed with them what would happen. And the result is nuclear war, a scenario.
You know, I'm still not over Oppenheimer. I really am not over that movie. I don't think I'll ever get over that movie. And then this adds to it in the way that I'm going to be a better educated American because you're sharing with us some amazing stuff.
You know, it's interesting that you say that because I have that same feeling, but here's the upside of that. Los Alamos, the laboratory, which, of course, a lot of the movie Oppenheimer takes place at, they have been very, very notoriously distant from journalists. All of my various books have touched upon nuclear weapons. I'm constantly at their, asking them for FOIA requests. I've gone to their library multiple times. But reporting this book was the first time that they actually were forthcoming with information. They even declassified for the book documents about the origin story of the president's nuclear football. That's what he carries around, his military aide carries around. And they did this. I asked them why. Why the sudden transparency? They told me the Oppenheimer effect. Ooh. Not the man, but the movie.
Ooh, see, chills. I mean, the thing about Hollywood is that they're jumping on this story, but they're doing it, 200 or 300 years later, people are still underneath the ground. As somebody who has done the investigating, how does that make you feel, knowing that they are making stories, these sci-fi stories, about something that we know nothing about?
Well, I'm all for public awareness, and I'm also uniquely aware of how impactful, modern movies and modern television shows about war are on warfighters, because I've interviewed hundreds of them and they have told me. And so I really think that being, learned about things, we don't have to say educated because it sounds so boring, like we're being lectured to, but just like learning things, understanding things, being curious. It's why I've done so many podcasts for this book tour, because people get curious and then they lean into the issue, and then it becomes a talking point, not among POTUS, President of the United States. Let's face it, the presidents are completely leaving nuclear weapons out of any of their discussions. And I think people are beginning to wake up to the fact that, wait a minute. President has sole presidential authority. To launch a nuclear war, the president asks permission of no one, not his SecDef, not the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, not the Congress. So why don't we as a people care more about a president and what he thinks about nuclear war.
That's right. That's right. You know, it's very scary to think that this one person has that decision to make, but there's got to be a lot of conversations before, sending out that information.
Well, that's a scary conversation, but even more alarming, as I wrote and you read, there are various protocols and policies in place. And because nuclear war, if it happens, is a sequence of events. That is why the book is written in a ticking time clock scenario. It happens in seconds and minutes, not in hours and weeks. The book that I write happens in 3 acts. In 72 minutes, it's over. Now, people may say, wow, that's like a wildly accelerated scenario. Well, let me give you a quote from former STRATCOM commander, General Keeler. The STRATCOM commander is in charge of the nuclear arsenal. It is he who speaks for the president to take the launch order. Keeler told me when we were discussing a nuclear exchange between Russia and the United States, he said, Annie, the world could end in the next few hours.
Wow. Well, and you know what? One of the things that you've been very truthful with is that you've exposed to our hearts and our reading experiences that there have been 6 times that we have come very close to this. I mean, I always knew of the 11 days of October. I didn't know about the others.
And they are really shocking. And I really work hard to get firsthand witnesses. So in one of the stories that you're referring to, I interviewed another former Secretary of Defense, Bill Perry, who was there for one of those false alarms. He was the person who was going to have to tell the president to launch a counterstrike because there was erroneous reporting of thousands of Russian nuclear weapons coming at the United States. You know what it turned out to be?
I'm waiting.
I'll tell you. Okay. It turned out, it's not funny. It's not funny. That's like a dramatic pause that Bill Perry, had anxiety in his voice after all these decades. It was a training tape.
What?
Meant to simulate nuclear war that had been put into the system in the bunker beneath the Pentagon and also was showing in the bunker beneath STRATCOM, the bunker in Nebraska, the nuclear bunker there. And so both of these command and control centers were seeing the same thing, which looked like a nuclear launch. Bill Perry said it looked real because it was meant to look real.
Wow. See, it's stuff like this that adds the fright to my day, only because I am so afraid of somebody who could get their hands on a dirty bomb. And it has nothing to do with national leaders, but it has to do with terrorism.
Well, there are lots of perils at hand, but shall I tell you the one positive, sort of hopeful moment in all of this reporting that I did?
Give me some hope.
Okay, because it is important. So when I was in high school, I'm dating myself here, in 1983, there was a television movie on ABC called The Day After.
The Day After, yeah.
And it was The Day After, and it was a fictional account of war between Russia and the United States. And it was horrifying, and 100 million Americans watched it. But one very important American watched it, and that was President Ronald Reagan.
Yep.
Before watching that film, Reagan was a nuclear hawk. He believed in more weapons, more nuclear weapons to keep America more safe. That was his premise. And after he watched it, here's the hopeful part, he experienced what is now known as the Reagan reversal. He changed his mind. He wrote in his White House journal, he became greatly depressed. He reached out to the enemy, Russia, and he and Gorbachev started having conversations. They had a Reykjavik summit, and the world went, because of that communication between those two world leaders, the world went from 70,000 nuclear weapons to the approximately 12,500 we have today.
Wow. That movie sits still in my heart, and the reason being is because the fourth city that they say that has been hit, Charlotte, North Carolina, which I moved to in 1985. To this day, I have never forgotten that movie.
That's fascinating, and you began the conversation with like your fear that you realized, oh my God, there's a nuclear weapon pointed at me wherever.
All the time, I believe that, all the time, and that's why I think I'm so glued to this book, because this book is speaking something that nobody else wants to talk about. But damn if you don't, Annie.
But what's shocking to me is that you say nobody else wants to talk about, and that is probably true in terms of the average, those of us who just are living our lives. But during COVID is when I was doing most of the major reporting on this book. And that's when everybody, air quotes, former high-ranking presidential advisors had a little more time on their hands and perhaps a little more time to think about big existential questions. And that's when they began talking to me. I did countless Zooms with these presidential advisors, cabinet-level people, all talking about how dangerous this threat is. And now think about where the world is just a few years later. We're having nuclear saber rattling like we haven't heard since, you mentioned, the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Wow. 10 minutes with you is not enough. You've got to come back to this show anytime in the future. I love where your heart is. I love your confidence. I love the way that you are willing to step into that story and get us some truth.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
You too.
Thank you.
Can you say his first name again, Michael?
His first name is Arrow, like bow and arrow. Isn't that correct, Arrow?
That would be right. And radio people didn't want me to use that name because it was too close to Harold.
And Arrow, here, I'm wearing the other shirt now.
Oh, man. Dude, you're such a child. I love this.
I got the Droids, I have the Beatles, and now I have the Mets.
Look at you.
Yes. They're all walking across that road. Anyway,
I love it.
Hope you're feeling better, Arrow. Here is Brigadier General Greg Smith. He goes by Greg Smith, and you have 20 minutes.
Greg, let me ask you that question. I mean, with calling yourself Greg Smith, I mean, I know what that role is like to become Arrow Collins. What do you have to fit into that role also?
Which role is that, Arrow?
The role of you becoming Greg the writer. That's what everybody knows you as. So therefore, I mean, so it's not every day that I get to meet somebody who gets to be someone else in their life. It's like a different chapter.
I get to be lots of things. You know what I love, Arrow, is in the old days when I was a brigadier general, I'm retired, but I'd come home from this massive operation in South America or in Boston or wherever. I'd get home and I'd get out of the car and I'd sort of drop my duffel bag, and my wife would say, "Hey, General,
Ooh.
That trash is stacking up in the barn. I think somebody needs to take care of it, General." So she was wonderful at cramming my ego back into my Red Sox baseball cap.
Oh, my God. That's like my wife. She looked at me one day and she says, don't give me any of your DJ radio crap because I know people more famous than you. And it was like, oh, my God.
That's beautiful.
Well, I want to thank you for your dedication to this nation, because without your leadership, I can't imagine where the mind, body, and souls of so many men and women would have been led to.
Well, Arrow, thank you, but it was really an honor to be able to serve in the positions that I served in, and I mean that.
Wow.
I was the lucky one.
Well, as you explain in your book, though, that one of the things that really stands out is that my brother was in the National Guard. He served our nation in the Guard in the early part of the 1970s during the Vietnam War. It's not the same National Guard as it was back then. I mean, what they expect today, oh my God, it's almost like you're world keepers.
Can I tell a quick story?
Please.
So I came through ROTC.
Yep.
And of course, most of my colleagues went into the regular Army. I went in the National Guard because I wanted to be a special ed teacher. There were sort of two vocations tugging at me. My biggest military experience was with the 82nd Airborne Division at Fort Bragg.
Yes.
All of a sudden, I'm in the Massachusetts National Guard. We're at our first summer camp at Fort Drum. So I've got my platoon, and we're laying out our defense. We're digging in the machine gun. We're plotting artillery fires, all of the mechanics of setting up a good defense. All of a sudden, I hear this whistle. My guys jump up and go racing to the command post headquarters. The weapons are on the ground, the wire's sitting there, the machine gun's all by itself. I'm like, what the heck? And I follow him, and there is the first sergeant, and he whips off this tarp, and it's a trailer full of ice and beer.
No.
And it's cocktail hour. And I'm scratching my head saying, where the hell am I?
Yeah.
The National Guard in the 1970s and 80s ran on as much beer as they did diesel fuel. But part of the reason that I wrote the book and what I wanted to get across, Americans should be tremendously proud of the National Guard as an organization because it picked itself up, transformed, and matured from this kind of Keystone Cop silliness into what I call America's Swiss Army knife, where today guardsmen staff clinics, drive school buses.
That's it.
They take over elder care. They pull people out of floodwaters. And then 2 weeks later, they get the call and they strap on their body armor, they pick up their weapons, and they go overseas and they fight. And that's a tremendous versatility, flexibility that institution now is able to provide to the American people that 30 years ago it couldn't think about.
You know, in the very beginning. In the very beginning, we talked about how, the different personalities and stuff when you change your name. But what about these men and women who serve the National Guard who've got to change their life? Like you said, you're a special ed teacher. How do you drop that persona of your life, that dedication, that loyalty and determination, and then all of a sudden go serve the nation? To me, anybody who serves this nation is a working machine. How do you turn it on and off?
So, Arrow, that's the interesting point, and therein lies the strength of the National Guard. I used to work for a general who said, when you get a guardsman, you get two professionals.
Yeah.
And that's so true, that they are mothers and fathers, they're mechanics, they're truck drivers, they're nurses, they're teachers. They don't leave that behind. When they go on duty in uniform, those skills are still there. That's why the National Guard is so effective in dealing with emergency and disaster responses, because they're citizens as well as soldiers. They understand they can empathize with the people who are being victimized in that situation. You know what they're really good at? They're really good at riot control.
Yes.
For that reason. I remember my first riot. 9 days into it, it turned into a love fest. I remember when it was all over, the strikers 6 months later sent an invitation to the armory inviting the soldiers to their Christmas party. But the first night, it was ugly.
Man, we had a riot here in Charlotte a couple of years back, and I'll tell you what, sure, the media was doing their job, getting right there in the middle of it all, but is it all like that? You being in the center of that, and I think that was one of my draws to this book, because I don't know what it's like to be in a situation of chaos.
I'm sorry, Arrow, to laugh, but maybe that's what we did best in the 70s and 80s was chaos.
Ooh, yeah.
No. I remember that riot experience quite well. And I was young. But it was really the first time in my life that I saw the face of somebody who really wanted to kill me.
Oh, God.
But it was ugly. But the interesting thing is, across the 9 days that we were on site for that civil disturbance, guardsmen managed to form a human connection with the rioters, so that by the end, people were like sitting down, sharing lunches, actually sharing a case of beer at one point. I remember I came around the bushes and caught my guys sitting in the grass drinking beer with the rioters.
Oh, my God.
And I said, oh, my God, I can't let this happen. And then I stepped back and said, the mission is to keep peace here. That's about as peaceful as it gets. I think I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
I know so many educators in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system that do ROTC. Isn't this book also for them, and that they should be sharing this book with those students? Because so many of them go in there for I don't want to say the wrong reasons, but they're not really healthy in the head and heart, and they need some direction. And a book like this really is a good pointer.
Arrow, it's interesting you say that, because I've been sending it out to ROTC professors. It's not a leadership handbook. It's not me saying, do what I did because these are the moves. No, quite the opposite. I'm telling you, I fell flat on my face. Don't do what I did. And then later on, maybe think about some of these things. But yeah, and part of the book also is when I joined the National Guard, I was 50% knucklehead.
Yeah.
And I made a lot of mistakes. The message there is that maybe you screw up in your life and you fall down. But you know what? You got a good heart and you got drive. You can still finish the race strong. Mm-hmm. I don't want to brag, but I came out of this as a general. So, I must have learned something.
But you've got to love that discipline, though, because I know even as a third-degree black belt, the discipline that we are trained with it sticks with you forever. And you being the son of one of the greatest generations, I mean, oh my God, that discipline, they came with discipline. Our parents did.
Well, I'm sorry if I can tell another story.
Please.
In ROTC, I had a mentor. He was actually part of Delta Force, and we didn't know it. I didn't know it until he died. Mm. But anyway, I was at ROTC down at Fort Bragg, and I wasn't doing well. And he came up to me. He said, "Hey, Greg, how are you?" And I said, "Oh, Sarge, they're riding me hard. I can't do anything right." And he's like, come here. You want to fix them?" And I said, yeah. Tell me how to fix them. He says, "Well, I'll tell you the secret." He said, "Lean in." And he yelled in my ear.
Oh, God.
He said, "Don't mess up." Only he didn't say mess, but I can't say that word on the radio. You know what? Through 40 years, that stuck with me. That whenever I felt like I was on the ropes, when I felt like I was defeated, when I felt like the enemy was too great to overcome, I realized that the only solution is to bear down, work harder, be tougher, don't whine, and don't make mistakes. And oh, by the way, at Fort Bragg, I did exactly that. And the big bad platoon sergeant left me alone. He went and picked on somebody else. It worked. But I never, ever forgot that the way to win is to beat them at their own game by being tougher. Mm. But yeah, I mean, that's what being in the military is about. That's what that guy gave to me. Mm. By the way, I hold him in my heart. Sergeant Al Drapo, unfortunately, he's no longer alive, but a hero to me.
Speaking of people, Corporal Harris has found a place inside your book as well.
Corporal Harris. Tell me about Corporal Harris.
Something about that. The one thing that I read about it, and I wanted to talk about it because a jokester that Corporal Harris had an issue, and it was like, okay, so how do you deal with other people that you're serving with that have these issues, especially with your background in special education, because you come in there with people skills, understanding the ups and downs and the unexpected, and then you get someone like a Corporal Harris who's going to add something to your day.
So, Arrow, let me just tell you why I'm a little quizzical. I could only use the real names of people in my book who gave me permission.
Okay.
So the person that you are referring to is a euphemism, which is why I was lost a little bit. So this is a person who was crossing boundaries around crossing sexual boundaries with one of the first women in our platoon. And the point of the matter is that as a leader, we lead by inspiration, by motivation, by calling on people's better angels. But what I had to learn is that sometimes when people screw up, you need to ball your fist and you need to smack them in the head. And I'm sorry, maybe I'm not supposed to say that on the air, but that was a really good example. The problem was I didn't do it fast enough, and I lost that young lady because she never should have had to put up with that from him. But that was part of what I learned is that, motivation, inspiration, appealing to people's better nature is the best way to form a team and to get the best out of people. But you know what? When somebody's not listening and you give them plenty of chances to listen, sometimes you need to just, tough love's important.
Yep.
And the other thing is that the organization is looking to you to enforce standards and set limits, and that's part of the job.
Mike Rowe is known for doing the dirty jobs, and the thing is that one of the things that I'm so inspired by you as an officer. You were put on lunchbox duty. I kind of chuckled when I heard that, because all of a sudden that keeps you down to the ground with the real Joe.
Loved it. Yep. When I was an assistant principal, I used to love the 45 minutes that I get to spend talking to kids and watching them eat. I learned, you know what, Arrow? I learned so much about what was happening in classrooms from what kids would talk about at lunch. It was fun. But that's not it. Did I write about that in the book?
Yes, you did. Otherwise, I wouldn't know anything about it. I mean, that.
Well, I suppose. How would you know that? Right. You know what? You're probably saying, did this guy read his own book?
So where can people go to find out more about you, General, or Greg? Where would you like people to go to find out more about you? So that, because I love your stories. I love them. To me, it's Americana, and it's just a piece of history that we cannot ever forget.
So Arrow, I guess that the point is, just read the book, because there are no secrets in there. I have to tell you, my son's fiance said to me at one point. Now, this young lady is about to marry into the family, and I've only met her a few times. She says to me at one point, "Nick, let me read your book. Did you really have a machete that you were going to go into a fight with?" And I said, "Ooh, maybe I shouldn't have put that part in the book."
Oh, my God. Please come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
Oh, Arrow, this was fun, and I'm working on another book, and when that one's done, Arrow, I definitely will be back. Well,
one of your books has to be How to Survive the Southern Heat in North Carolina when you're at Fort Bragg.
Oh, heavens, I think about that a lot. The next one, though, is about my adventures in South America.
Oh, God.
That was a really interesting time.
Oh, wow. Oh, I can't wait for that. Okay, I'm going to book you then. We got to get together and talk again.
Then I better get writing.
Okay, buddy. Well, you have a brilliant day today, okay?
Yeah. Thanks, Arrow. This was fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.